a lot of large institutions are looking at ACH and saying, hey, our credit card acceptance costs are super, super high. How can we reduce it? There is a really exciting movement of what are these alternative networks? And I would say like ACH is sort of the original alternative network.
Hey everybody, James Shepard here with another edition of the Merchant Sales Podcast. Today we're talking to Tommy Chipman from Payliance, a really interesting company. We're talking about ACH because ACH doesn't really get talked about that much, but it's still a crucial part of the payments ecosystem, something that's not really understood very well. So we really focus in on ACH, but also talk about the payments industry in general. Tommy has just a super interesting background and some crypto stuff and PayFacs and ACH and just a lot of really interesting experiences. So we dive into kind of the payments industry in general. Then we have some sales tips coming to your way from Rich Norton. And then also we have Today in Payments, where you can keep up on the latest payments news and information. So excited to have that today as well. So as we dive into this episode, a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, this episode is brought to you by Nativia. Nativia is an amazing company in the payments industry. If you're looking to really grow and scale your business, you need capital, you need resources, you need operational excellence. That is Nativia. So I highly recommend going over to ccsalespro.com/Nativia and checking them out. And then lastly, Payliance is not a sponsor or paid consulting client or anything like that. This is just a great interview with a fantastic person in the industry. So with that being said, let's dive into this interview. Hey everybody, I'm here today with Tommy Chipman, who is the VP of Channel Sales and Technology Partnerships for Payliance. How you doing today, Tommy?
Hey, what's up, James? I'm good, man.
Awesome.
It's snowing here in Bend, Oregon, but I'm doing okay.
Snowing. Oh man, that makes me feel better. It's actually warmed up a little bit here in Pennsylvania, so I feel a little better about that. Usually I'm interviewing guys that are in like Miami or LA, and I'm like, oh man, um, hey, so we're gonna
Miami
talk.
is good, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about ACH today, and so Payliance has a big presence there. We're going to talk about some other things that they're doing as well. But before we do that, Tommy, I'd love to hear your story. How did you get into this crazy industry, and how did you end up at Payliance?
Yeah. It's a good question. I was living in San Francisco. I graduated college there. Like most people, I uh, studied philosophy, super relevant to payments. And I sort of fell into the internet and the startup sort of space in San Francisco.
Sure.
I was working for a startup called Flipboard that was completely non-payments adjacent, and then sort of messed around, tried to start my own, ran out of money, and realized that I needed a real job, and got hired at Visa in 2013, and worked at Visa until 2021. I call it my 9-year MBA program. And I started there just managing accounts. So I worked specifically with large merchants and payment service providers, specifically in the payments acceptance realm. So not like really the credit card piece, but
Right.
more of like the actual acceptance and the sort of like old school version of what Stripe is today. So CyberSource and Authorize.net
Right.
and then in the later part of my career, I was reporting directly to the executives there and was selling like the core infrastructure of those things to large payment service providers and platforms.
Hmm.
And then left in 2021 and went to crypto. Actually, I went to the largest crypto infrastructure provider in the world called Blockdaemon. And Blockdaemon essentially is like Amazon Web Services for crypto. So they essentially host
Right.
node infrastructure for people to get access to blockchain. And I led the payments group there. So we sold infrastructure to PayPal, Plaid, Citibank, JP Morgan, and it was sort of setting up for like stablecoin stuff that's happening today.
Right.
And that was in 2021. So the regulatory space was still like a little bit bizarre and people
Right.
weren't quite sure what was going on. And
Yeah.
it actually sort of helped informed sort of the opportunistic uh, sort of idea that I have around ACH today, which was people are super excited about displacing networks. specifically displacing credit card networks for lower cost, faster sort of cross-border payments, transactions,
Mhm.
more transparency in payment costs, and so on and so forth. And people were trying to do that in stablecoin, and it is rapidly sort of getting there now, which is great. But a lot of it is sort of riding on the infrastructure and the philosophy around ACH and wire
Right.
transfer and some of the old school banking infrastructure tools. Um, and then I left Blockdaemon and did some consulting and investing. And one of the executives at Visa is on the board at Payliance, gave me a call about 9 months ago and almost a year ago and said, "What are you doing?" And introduced me to John Cullen, who's the CEO of Payliance. And here I am, 7 months later.
Wow, that's great, man. That's really good. I love your background. It's like you've done so many different things in the payment space. It probably gives you a pretty broad perspective on things. So let's talk ACH. So I know again, Payline says a lot of things, which we'll get to in a minute, but today kind of focusing in on the ACH piece. Why is ACH such a popular, method of value transfer today? Especially, I know you guys have a focus on like lending and some different verticals, but what is your feeling on ACH and just kind of why it's really remained very relevant? I mean, it's a very legacy form of moving money around, but it's remained very relevant.
Yeah. And like legacy, it's um, so for folks who aren't super familiar with it, it is operated by Nacha, which is essentially a bank consortium that sets up rules and compliance and regulatory models. And then it's, for all intents and purposes, is government rails. So it runs on banking government infrastructure rails. And it is it traditionally was relatively slow, right? And there was a settlement and a hold process,
Right.
another thing that I think was sort of threw a lot of people off. And I think a lot of people. I think what's interesting is generationally, there's like comfort levels and types of payments, and I would say that the sort of older generation are a little bit or we're always a little bit sort of adverse to ACH because you have to put your routing number and account numbers in. And like,
Right.
from birth, people were like, don't give anyone your social security number, don't give anyone your bank account and routing
Right.
number.
Right. Right.
Um, and it was always like sort of a hard, difficult user experience. Fast forward to the future. Um, the credentialing piece of it, since Plaid came about, in like 2000 or 2017, has made the user experience of like entering your banking credentials or connecting a bank much easier.
Right.
And folks are much more sort of comfortable with, hey, I have a token or I enter my bank account credentials one time. It's easier. And the speed at which ACH settles has become a lot faster. And the risk of ACH is actually a lot less. So, there is from a risk perspective, credit card chargebacks are relatively prevalent, but there's also it's a two-way street, right? So, a merchant can sort of argue for it, an individual has to argue for it. In ACH, there's unauthorized returns, and that's essentially like it's just unauthorized. If you didn't authorize it, you didn't authorize it. And so
Right.
it has a little bit safer sort of and lower risk threshold. And it's really good for, recurring payments, utilities. A lot
Right.
of us are familiar with it, like you pay your mortgage via ACH, things like that, right? And over time, it's really, really started to grow. So, it
Yeah.
already was very large. I think, 2022, I think somewhere around 75, $76 trillion went over the ACH rails.
Hmm.
Um, and about 1.5 of that was same day. So, a really sort of great evolution of ACH was 3 day
Right.
hold, day hold, now same day.
Right.
So
Right.
merchants can get their money same day, which is great.
Right.
The underwriting infrastructures of companies who are doing that has gotten a lot better, and so
Yeah.
it's all sort of started to mirror and catch up to traditional credit card networks, which is faster, real time, really, really smooth user experience and
Yeah.
just a real acceptance of the tools.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's so many advantages I feel like too on the acceptance side, right? Because with ACH, if you're running to a business account, there's not that chargeback risk quite as long, right? You also
Right.
have the issue of Visa and Mastercard have gotten a lot better at kind of auto updating cards with expiration and things, but with
Yeah.
ACH, it's like, man, you don't have to worry about that at all. There is no such thing as that kind of expired ACH. It's like, it's there. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's funny that you did that. I have a bullet point there that says there's no like account updater, right? Like essentially, bank
right,
accounts don't necessarily change. And there are some really great tools, and Paylines has a suite of them for verification and bank verification. So you can check to, see how much
right,
money is in the account. Is the account an actual account? Like, is this a real number?
right,
Similar to like a credit card authorization, right?
right,
So all of those sort of analogous tools to uh, card flows exist in ACH, and over time they've now gotten better. Most of the infrastructures are REST APIs, and things are real time and moving quickly. And so um, now, now a lot of large institutions and large merchants are looking at ACH and saying, "Hey, as we go through our P&L, our credit card acceptance costs are super, super high,
right,
or it's a huge chunk of our business. How can we reduce it?" And a 2% reduction is a huge reduction on a $30 million line item. So,
right, right.
you know, there is a really sort of
Hmm.
exciting movement of what are these alternative networks, and I would say like ACH is sort of the original alternative network.
Yeah, it is. It is. So you kind of alluded to this a second ago, but let's dig into risk a little bit more. So obviously with ACH, we have to mitigate risk. So how is that done, and what kind of tools is Payliance? You could again, you already alluded to them a little bit, but talk more about the tools that you guys have put in place to mitigate this risk of ACH fraud and things like that.
Yeah. So we look at NSF returns and payment failures, and we offer some automatic retry logic and intelligent payments routing around trying to get increased success rates for ACH transactions. Um, and a lot of this has to do with checking a bank account to see if the funds are available and so on and so forth. And Paylines has been around for 15 years, and um, our sort of core customer base for a long time was lending, and that is a very complex regulatory industry. And so Paylines has a very complex regulatory system in how we, follow regulations. We're also a fully licensed collection agency. We don't buy debt or anything. We essentially have infrastructure and tools to automate and increase the success um, of debt repayment.
Right.
We've sort of taken a lot of those tools and said, hey, how can we do this from a non-lending perspective and reseller tools and providing this for low risk ACH transactions and high risk transactions, but to really improve acceptance rates and the sort of flow of money. So that has played really well for us, and the underlying sort of infrastructure and how we built the company or how the company was built in general has lent really well to a really, really great compliance and regulatory structure. Um, from a settlement perspective, we can do all different types of settlements, so same day, next day, 3-day holds, and we work, from a lending perspective, we work with lenders and provide float and help them with sort of flow of funds and so on and so forth, and the
Right.
waterfall in which they um, disperse money and get it back. And then we also look at other payment rails too. So we do provide credit card and debit card and debt repayment through debit card,
Right.
and then
Right.
real-time payments as well, which real-time payments is like a whole nother can of worms, but for all intents and purposes, I like in my mind, I think of it as like ACH 2.0.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
you
I think
know,
most people do. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a really great tool, and it's really starting to catch on as the underwriting and integration of it has gotten a lot better. And what Paylines does too is in the same API call, if you try an RTP, a real-time payments and it doesn't go through, you can actually just run an ACH. It's essentially in the same call or in your next call or your next retry. So we really do sort of set it up for, hey, like let's try the fastest payment methods and the most lowest cost, and then we have sort of a waterfall of how you can get to funds in sort of the quickest way.
Hmm.
And risk of insufficient funds and fraudulent checks. We've got some tools, to mitigate that. RCC and we do like check scanning and digital check creation and things like that.
Right.
And then one that I think is really interesting is check guarantee. And I think there's a much bigger conversation around this, but I think a lot of people are familiar with things like chargeback guarantees.
Right.
This is like relatively similar. I don't want to say it's the same thing or analogous, but sort
Right.
of along the same thought process of, Payliance will go out and if a check is returned, well, depending on the sort of risk threshold of the check, we can go out and then we can go and get those funds for you.
Right.
Based on, hey, this was an authorized transaction, this was an authorized check or an authorized ACH, and then go get it for you.
Right.
So, this shifts the risk away from the business by, ensuring that funds are available and reducing the return risk. So, we really think about the entire life cycle of the transaction from an ACH perspective, while also thinking about all of the other opportunities. Hey, is RTP a good opportunity here? Is debit card a good
Right. Right.
opportunity here? And we really think about it from the lowest cost, the sort of waterfall of cost of acceptance.
Hmm. So, so I want to zoom out a minute because this is so interesting. You've got this background, even with crypto. We just talked about RTP. We're talking about ACH. Obviously, Payline says card acceptance. Where does ACH, fit into the future of payments? And how do you see the next kind of 3 to 5 years playing out in terms of these different forms of payment? Where do you see these things kind of going when you're looking at it from a, kind of zooming out a little bit?
Yeah. I think, growth of same day ACH. So,
Right.
um, same day settlement. And I say that like both that and RTP, right, are sort of one and the same,
Right.
in there. And RTP does have a little bit different cost structure of ACH, but not hugely different. And then open banking, I think, is really sort of blowing the lid off of things here, and that's more common in Europe, but it's starting
And
to happen more in the
do you mean that in
United States.
terms of like bank to bank transfer? Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, bank to bank and also like credentialing.
Sure.
I
So
think
the plaids of
probably,
the world and things like that being there. So in other words, I think what you're saying is potentially we're reducing the friction of creating an ACH or an RTP because now you can just log into your bank account. And it's more of a seamless experience to create the payment in the first place.
yeah, and the way that I personally like to think about it, and I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, but when I think about open banking, I think about like tokenization or network tokenization, which is what Visa and MasterCard and American Express have done, which is like this sort of Uber token, right?
Right.
And not Uber ride hailing, but like Uber in the sense of the
Yes.
word.
Yes. All encompassing.
Yeah. And Visa tried to buy Plaid and a lot of that was because it fit into that sort of strategy, and they ended up
Yeah.
buying
Yeah.
Tink, which was a much smaller
Right.
sort of version of Plaid. But and I think in the news recently too, MasterCard and Visa have sort of teamed up and said, hey, let's try to convince people to do credentialing, which is for all intents and purposes, open banking and credentialing a
Right.
bank account.
Right.
And they're like tying it into sort of like network of networks, right? Where, hey, either you use the credit card networks or the debit networks or ACH networks,
Mm.
but they want to be a part of it. And I think that is a sort of writing on the wall of them realizing, hey, people are starting to get frustrated with the cost of interchange and credit card acceptance. And so there are all these sort of alternative ways to run transactions that are cheaper. Um,
Mm.
and that open banking, and ACH APIs and like the availability of all these is really, really sort of coming into play. And I would say too, the tokenization and stablecoin thing is really
Mm.
accelerating that conversation. And
Yeah.
where that piece is really playing in is cross-border. And a lot of
Mm. Sure.
the credit card networks, I think at one point in time, like 25% of Visa's revenue came from cross-border and FX fees.
Right.
And it's like a crazy amount. And so,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the stablecoin sort of use cases were, hey, let's do cross-border payments. But what's funny is a lot of people were like, well, how do we get stablecoin? Well, you gotta get fiat to stablecoin, and people are using ACH. And then they're like,
Right.
oh, well, this is actually a really great way to on and off ramp these different, transactions. It's low cost, especially if you're
Right.
doing large sums of money.
Sure.
Uh, and then ACH and subscriptions and in embedded finance. So um, for I think embedded finance, you talked about it a lot. It's sort of a buzzword where all these different specialty software platforms are saying, hey, let's also just put transactions into the flow and experience of what people need
Right.
for specific niche use cases, whether it's plumbing software or golf course software. It's like payments are just built in.
Sure.
And I think we're going to start seeing more of the option for ACH. I've actually seen this recently. I was looking at a booking a cabin, and they had a pay by bank option, and they offered me 5% off my booking, which is super interesting. And that's like, wow, it was that much cheaper for them to incentivize me to use
Wow.
a banking credential to pay for this than it was on a credit card network.
Right. Right.
So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that.
That's interesting. Okay, so man, we can go on talking about this for a while. I actually have more questions, so we'll have to jump on another. We'll have to do part two. But for today, as we wrap this up, I want you to talk about Payliance a little bit. So again, my audience here primarily we're talking about ISOs.
Mhm.
Talk to the ISOs for a minute about Payliance. What do you guys offer to ISOs, and where would you send them to learn more?
Yeah. So the reason I joined Payliance was to help grow our channel and technology partnerships group, and we've got about 200 plus ISOs and ISVs and lending management platforms that either embed Payliance's ACH technologies for payments acceptance or resell it. So, and we've got a lot of different ways that we do business. We do just straight referral. The way that I really like to think about it is who's doing the selling, who's doing the billing, and who owns the liability. And in most cases, Payliance can, or the ISO, the ISV, or uh, the independent sales rep owns the sales. They send the merchants to us. We'll do the underwriting, own the liability, and we can do the billing. We do the billing in different ways. We can sort of do branded billing, or we can do it just bill Payliance. We have a large merchant services and merchant support teams. Or for larger ICOs and ISVs, we actually will bill them directly, and they can bill their merchants and sort of own the whole piece, or the fully embedded, piece where hey, this technology is awesome. We want to embed it into our software experience. The client really never knows who Payliance is. And either any of those sort of models are fine for us, but what we really like to do is like walk through it and understand what are the margins and help with pricing and really make sure that everybody's sort of getting the best in-class experience and lowest cost, highest margins, all those sort of things.
Yeah, of course.
Um, yeah, and we've introduced some really great new reporting tools. We've got some really interesting white labeling tools coming down the pipeline. We've just rolled out a new API for the larger ISOs. And then we've also, for smaller independent sales reps, have rolled out a new underwriting process that's all digital. So they can fill out applications on behalf of their clients. They can actually send them a link to fill out the application themselves. And then they can come and check in on the speed and the get updates on the underwriting process and get notified when applicants are approved or declined. And it's a really nice user experience, much better than paper apps and going and chasing down stuff and scanning stuff and so on and so forth.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, and I think the best way, if people got questions, they can obviously, reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, anything like that, or they can email sales inquiry at payliance.com.
Sales inquiry at payliance.com. And that's PAYLIANCE.
You got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Good. We'll make
Yeah.
sure I got that right for our listeners. So, Tommy, thank you so much. You got a wealth of knowledge and experience in the industry. Really appreciate you sharing it with us today. I'm sure we'll have you back on to continue the conversation. So, thanks very much.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, James. Appreciate you.
So I'm back here with my good friend Rich Norton. How you doing today, Rich?
I'm doing excellent. Always great to talk with you, my friend.
Absolutely. So we've been talking the last couple weeks. We did kind of the science of selling, then the psychology of selling. We talked about morning routine, but let's go a little broader today and talk about time management. Obviously, the one thing that we all have in common is we all have the same amount of minutes in our day. So talk about your mindset around time management and how we use that resource.
Yeah, such a great point. I always start out by telling everybody take inventory of your day,
Mm.
and you'll be amazed on how much time that you waste. I like it when people ask me, they're like, "Hey, did you watch that reality show such and such at 9:30 last night?" I'm like, "Nope, never heard of it, and don't even plan on watching it at all." And people waste, and I'm not telling people don't have fun. You want to enjoy life, but it's amazing how much time that people can waste. And when you start taking inventory of your day, of all the things that are just wasting your time and taking away from you becoming successful, you can get rid of a lot of things, and you can get rid of a lot of stress too. Most people create their own stress because they don't have a plan. They don't plan out their day. And here is my philosophy, and I think those of them taking notes out there should write this down. Time is my capital. I have to invest it wisely. Every second counts. So if you're wasting time, spending time doing all this garbage stuff, watching the news and all this other stuff, some people will watch all these news stations for hours upon hours and keep listening to all the negativity where you can get all that info in about 2 minutes. So quit wasting time. Time is your capital. Invest it wisely. And it not only counts in life in general, but it really does count in our business. Because how can you go out and write two a day, three a day, if you have 5 hours, 6 hours in a day? Well, you have to look at how you're spending your time in the field. And the time that you waste with a non prospect stops you from being with the right merchant. So no's are part of what we do. We're not in the convincing business. You could be talking to a merchant, pounding your head up against the wall. I'm going to spend an hour and a half with this business. I'm writing them no matter what. I'm going to cram it down their throat. And then you walk out of there so frustrated. Like, I spent all this time with the merchant. I can't believe I wrote it. Meanwhile, you have a merchant right down the road that was just saying, wow, we got our statement. We're spending too much. We need to do something here, talking to their assistant. And by the time you go to that one, either that person's gone or you're ticked off and you yell at them when you meet them. Hey, my name's Rich. I'm helping people. They're like, whoa. So it's important to understand that every second of your time has to be spent wisely when you're out in the field. For example, some people say, hey, we ought to do lunch sometime. Can you meet for lunch? Or let's go over here. I'm like, nope. Can't do that at all. I don't have lunch. I'm out in the field. I'm making every second count. Here's my lunch. I got a little lunch box, right? That's my proof right there. So I'm eating while I'm contacting merchants. I'll say, if you want to meet me for breakfast at 6 in the morning somewhere, more than happy to do that. But while I'm out in the field, I'm making every second count. You can spend a whole hour and a half at a lunch. Think about how many businesses that you can contact during that time. So every second counts, and that goes with the way we present everything. We can have this whole long, drawn out presentation and end up talking them out of it because it sounds just so overwhelming. Your presentation is so long that you need intermission right in the middle because it's too long. So
Right,
forget about that. There's some businesses that you can write up in 5 minutes. Some
right.
of the smaller to the medium sized businesses, and they're basically saying, I want it. And you're like, no, wait a minute. I still got part 8 of my presentation. I want it. So go
Yeah.
out and present them and make every second count. Time is your capital. Invest it wisely.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Two thoughts I had that I wanted to get your thoughts. So one of them that's so funny is you're saying this about lunch. I'm sitting here right now. I'm a little bit hungry actually because I implemented something new in the last week where I realized that lunch is my least healthy, least productive meal of the day. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started doing this really big breakfast and then I eat dinner. And I was like, I just got an entire like hour of my day back 5 days a week, 365 days a year. That's massive. So, it's like you have to be willing and I may try something different. And, you have to be willing to try things. And even, I'm 41 years old. I'm pretty successful guy, but I'm still trying stuff. I want to figure out, wait
Yeah.
a minute, can I get a little time back over here? Can I get a little time back there? And so you want to be trying things and experimenting. But the other thing, Rich, I want to get your thoughts on. One thing I found is people with a plan, it seems like life tends to kind of work around the people's plan that have a plan. You know, when
Yes.
people know that I have a schedule and my schedule is usually done at least a week in advance, if not further. And so as a result of that, when there's a group text and everybody's going, "Hey, we want to do this," generally everybody starts by saying, "Hey, James, when are you available?" And they do
Yes.
that because they know I have a very structured life and I have a lot of
That's
scheduled
right.
things. And I'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm available on this day or whatever." And they'll tend to adjust what they were going to do to my schedule because whoever is planned out the furthest in advance kind of wins in this time game.
That's right.
If you know what I
That's
mean. And
right.
so what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that? I feel like you got to get those constraints and even with your significant other, it's like you have to have these conversations and say, okay, let's be realistic here. What's going to work? And when, for me, I do drop my kids off at school. That's something I do every single day. I even make breakfast. Almost every day I make breakfast and take my kids to school. But I get up early in the morning and do other things. And then I work and sometimes I'll work later. And so my wife and I have to have these conversations. So talk a little bit about like the structure and getting life to kind of work around that.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes back to the whole thing about, do you fly by the seat of your pants? And
Right.
you'll find that the ones that do, that have no structure in life, if you really think about it, those are the ones that are the most stressed out. I mean, you're around them. It's like, I got to go here. I got to run. They're always in a hurry. They're always rushing around, and they
Yeah.
don't really get a lot accomplished. They're busy. They're
Right.
not productive, but they're busy. And there's a big difference between being busy or being productive. And my commitment is to always be productive. And you're right. My wife and I talk about that. And when we make plans with other people, a lot of say, "Hey, I know you got a lot going on, and you're keeping busy, but hey, can we do breakfast, or can we go? What are you guys doing next weekend? Or you want to go to a concert?" I'm like, "Okay, let me check the schedule, and yeah, we can fit that in. That works for me." So
Right.
when people know that you're a high performer and you're organized, they respect that,
Yeah.
and they'll talk to you and try to make plans. And
Yeah.
and not only that, they want to be around you, because
Yeah.
people want to be around people that are positive and have a great life, and really spread good cheer and encouragement to everybody else. People want to be around positive people as
Yeah.
opposed to people that are flying by the seat of their pants, unproductive, and just stressed
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So that's really, really good point.
One other quick tip that I wanted to provide, and I'm curious if you have something similar. Early on with payment processing for me, I would do things like tell the merchant, they were interested, but I needed to come back for something. And I would say like, oh yeah, well when are you available? When can I come back to talk to you?
Yes.
Because I was very excited
Yeah.
about it. And I very quickly realized that was totally unnecessary. I started saying to them,
Hmm.
I'm going to be back out here on Wednesday and Friday. Wednesday is going to be in the morning, Friday is the afternoon. Which of those works better for you? And I
Yes.
realized that even the merchants will work around my schedule if I have one. I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Yes. Such a good point. You can be desperate salesman, right, or
Right.
salesperson, and they say, "Okay, come in. When do you want me to come back? Is it okay if I come back tomorrow?" That's the weak, desperate salesperson, and
Right.
that goes to many of the points that I make. You're the most busiest person in the area. You're the one everybody wants to talk to, and if you say to them, "As you can imagine, I keep busy. Here's the good news. I'm going to be back in the area tomorrow." And I promised several other businesses in this area that I was going to be able to help them out. One person, I have to be there because they just want to make sure that I'm there. But the good news, I'll be around all day. I got a few spots open, thankfully. What works better for you, morning or afternoon?
Right. Right. And you give them
Yeah.
give that alternate advance, especially when you're driving a long way. A lot of times you have certain areas where you're like, this is where I want to be on Monday. This is where I want to be. And
Yes.
I actually end up splitting my area. So I ended up taking my area on a map and I drew a kind of a box and I had four kind of quadrants. And it was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then Friday was my day to go wherever I needed to go. That's how I did it.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had that memorized. And so I knew, and I'd say, well, yeah, I'm going to be back here on, Monday or whatever. So I have my day where I would try to go and get these deals
Yeah.
done. So you got to have a structure and you got to have a way to manage the time. So,
No doubt
uh,
about it. And that goes back to the plan of knowing that exactly where you're going. Like I know every week what days, like Monday, I'll be in one area and I'll set it up to be back in that area Thursday. Tuesday, I might be back in that area Friday. So I can say to them, I got great news. I'm not, because sometimes when they say, can you come back tomorrow? No, I'd love to. I've got another area. I'm helping out a bunch of people. But the good news is I'm going to be back in the area on Wednesday or whatever day you're going to be back. I can squeeze you in then. What works better, morning or afternoon?
Right. Exactly. It's that concept and getting that across, and not even in a you're not it's not a trick or a lie. It's you genuinely have a structured life that you've planned
That's right.
things out, and as a result, that's going to come through, and that confidence is going to come through, and people are going to say, "Well, my goodness, this person's pretty important, pretty busy. I better squeeze in here where I can, and I better have a meeting with them." And then when you come back, there's a different mindset. It's like, "Well, this is that person that I had to schedule with." and
Yes.
and there and small
Yes.
business owners aren't used to that, and so that's good. So anyway, Rich, has all been great stuff. For those who want to reach out to you, learn more about getting that coaching, achieving that level of success in the industry, where would you send them to learn more?
That's our commitment to help take representatives to a high level. You can reach me at 904-434-4635, or you can email me at payrock, Payroc, Rich Norton at gmail.com.
Awesome. As always, a pleasure. Thanks so much, Rich.
Thank you so much.
Well, James, it's official. Capital One has received the go-ahead from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Reserve to purchase Discover.
Wow.
And it's
Okay.
gonna the deal's supposed to close pretty soon, May 18th. I mean,
Oh,
that's
wow. That's really
that's
fast.
really fast. I haven't seen one that fast in a long time.
Yeah, for a deal that big, I mean, that's really quick.
Yeah, they must have done a lot of work in the background.
Yeah.
But obviously it's going to bring heightened competition into the payments business. But, Rich Fairbank, who was the founder and he's also the president and CEO, I think, of Capital One.
Hmm.
He said something there was a video that accompanied the press release, and it kind of reminded me of our conversation last week. Remember last week we were talking about, is this going to be competition for the banks, or is it going to be competition for Visa and MasterCard?
Right. Right.
So I after watching this video a few times, I think it's the latter. I mean, he said, quote,
Yeah.
this deal accelerates our long-standing journey to work directly with merchants to leverage our customer base and data to drive more sales for merchants and greater deals for consumers and small businesses.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's both. I think it's really like a good way to think of it in my mind is they're trying to compete with Chase, right? But
Right?
doing it at an even higher level. So when you think about Chase, when
Right?
you look at a merchant statement like a Chase, a merchant that's a banking customer of Chase,
Right?
when they process Chase cards, they're in their own category. Chase is running those over obviously their own network because they're doing the
Their own
issuing
net.
and the acquiring.
Right?
Whereas with this, it's like a whole other level because it's like they're gonna literally own the card network. So it's not even
Right?
with Chase, that still is a Visa card. I believe it's a Visa that they use. So it's still a Visa
Yeah.
card. Whereas
Right.
with this, Capital One, it's like they literally own the card network that they're using. I mean, that's
And it's
very,
gonna,
very
yeah,
powerful.
and it's not gonna just be Discover cards that are gonna be running over that network.
So is that right? I would think that it would still be Discover. So
No, that's what I'm saying. Yes, it would be.
I see. Oh, I see what you're saying. It would be just so it's still that you have the Discover cards are running. But what's going to happen is you're gonna basically take a bank and supercharge a bank and take a card network and supercharge a card network at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really great
Which
deal. I haven't seen a deal that had more synergy than this in a long time because there's so much overlap, you know?
there's so much, so much. I'm like, and obviously, like I said, with something that's gonna close that fast, it's obviously they've been working the logistics for
Oh
a
yeah.
while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, definitely be a very interesting one to watch and see how it turns out. But I feel like if they can execute on this, it's going to be a fantastic transaction for both sides. So
Well,
really
and
cool.
it's really interesting when you think about it, because Discover started like 40 years ago as an experiment by Sears Roebuck and Company.
Mm.
They were the ones that launched Discover. It was a
I didn't
big
know that
deal.
actually. That's
Yeah, it was a
interesting.
big deal. It was launched during Super Bowl. It was like one of those big Super Bowl announcements.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, yeah. And
Interesting.
then, Sears at the time was the largest retailer in the country.
Sure.
So, it launches its own network. Well, as time goes on, Sears loses, Sears had a whole financial services unit. It also had a
Mm.
brokerage. Dean Witter was part of Sears.
Really?
And
Wow, I did not know
yeah,
that.
yeah. So it had all
Mm.
this stuff going on, and then it had to slowly cut out all of its
Wow. Mm.
financial aspects, and then
Right.
so it's just interesting to me to see it
Yeah, see
become
it going.
go full circle
Yeah.
like that.
Mm. So interesting. All right, Patty,
So
what's our
okay,
next one?
our next up is Visa is going to have its a product drop. It just announced a product drop for April 30th. It's going to be, it says this will be its 2025 roadmap for transforming the way consumers shop and buy with AI.
Wow. Okay.
So it's going to be CEO Ryan McInerney and the Chief Product and Strategy Officer Jack Forstall are going to unveil new products, solutions, and technology partners, which they say are poised to transform the next generation of commerce.
Wow.
You know, uh, I just was very taken by the fact that it's going to dive into this world of AI commerce.
I love it. I mean, I'm assuming one of their partners is going to be OpenAI, I would imagine.
I would imagine,
Kind of a
sure,
no-brainer. I mean, at this point, you can go in there, you can go to ChatGPT and you can find the product that you want to buy. You just can't
yeah,
buy it.
right.
And I'm sure that long-term OpenAI wants to control that transaction experience
Can
as well. So,
can you see? Yeah, I mean, it would be a perfect.
yeah, in many ways, what I'll tell you what's really interesting about that. I hadn't thought of it in this way before, but it's like when you think about ChatGPT, primarily I've thought of them as a new innovation and a
Right,
major competitor to Google. Like
right.
I don't use Google anymore ever. I really don't.
I
Um,
use them both.
yeah, I'm done. Like every time I've used Google in the last 6 months, I've been like, why did I just do that? I could have used ChatGPT and it would be so much better. So I use ChatGPT, but what's interesting is they're also a potential competitor to Amazon because when you think about Amazon,
Yeah,
Amazon is basically an e-commerce platform where you go to find the things you want to buy and you can easily purchase them. Well,
right,
why couldn't ChatGPT become that, right? Because
sure,
you're going to search for the products. They're a lot better at searching for them than Amazon. And so it's like, oh, I
right,
can find the product, or maybe they're even going to do deals with companies like Amazon because now you can search Amazon anyway, and they'll be like, hey, here's a link to the product you want to buy on Amazon. It's like, well, I want to be able
sure.
to buy that right here on on ChatGPT. So yeah, that's going to
That's
be
a
very interesting. Yeah,
that's an interesting take. I hadn't really thought about that, and especially because Amazon, like you say, it's a platform that brings a lot of merchants together, but there's a
yeah,
lot, when I
yeah,
go searching, I'll look at Amazon, but I'll do a Google or a Chat GTP also, because I know, well,
right.
look at, I might be able to get a better deal,
Right, exactly. Yep. And when you have
you know?
ChatGPT like crawling the internet, finding all the best deals, I think for them to create an e-commerce platform is a bit of a no-brainer. They're gonna,
Yeah,
and, an
yeah,
AI first e-commerce platform is probably gonna happen. So that's gonna be very
yeah,
interesting as
yeah.
well. Okay,
I
well
definitely see that.
that's a really interesting one. All right, what's our next one?
Our next one is the ACH. It's every year about this time they announce their growth, and they've been charting some impressive growth.
Hmm.
They had they let's say they began. I'm sort of saying they began 2025 with a bang. 326 million same day payments valued at nearly $1 trillion for the first quarter.
Wow.
That's a 19% increase over Q1 of 2024.
Wow. And that's just the same day?
That's just the same day.
Wow, that's crazy.
In all, the ACH handled 8.5 billion transactions,
Right.
valued at $22 trillion.
Hmm.
So, you know, that was really like a small part of the total.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I remember the days when 326 million was a lot for the whole ACH to do.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
So
crazy. That really is pretty crazy.
that's pretty.
It's such a huge opportunity. And it's so interesting because we record these separate from the episodes, but I'm pretty sure this one's going
Right.
out with our one where I interviewed the Payliance talking about ACH.
Oh,
So
perfect.
Yeah, so it fits in, but I think ACH is such a huge opportunity anyway.
Yes,
And we
yes.
talk about that in this episode, but it's like such a big opportunity, and I think this just underscores that form of value exchange is not going anywhere. It's a big one.
No, and especially for the B2B. I mean,
Absolutely, such a
you know,
huge opportunity. Yeah.
B2B showed growth of 9% in terms of transactions
Mm.
and totaled 1.9 billion. Of these, 125 million were healthcare claims from insurers.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which kind of goes again with something we talked about last week with, the healthcare and the claims.
Right.
Um, that's a big opportunity.
Yeah.
P2P payments passed the 100 million mark for the first time, which is
Wow.
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because I don't think of the ACH for P2P, but
But that's what it's using behind the scenes, right? That's the rails
right,
running on behind the scenes.
right, running behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
Right.
And it's really interesting because, direct deposit was what the ACH was originally, it was sort of like the first application, right?
Right.
It was the only category where the transactions fell. It was
Yeah.
about a 0.3% decline, which is not a big
Mm.
decline, but
Right.
when you consider things like, 19% increase, $1 trillion. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
clearly that's the B2B is driving it right now.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Good stuff. All right. I think we have one more today, right? You have
One
four?
more today. One
Okay.
more. And, I alluded to this last week. WorldPay for the past decade has been collecting payment data from around the world.
Sure.
And I often use this data in my reporting.
Yeah.
So recently, executives from WorldPay took their data sets to Capitol Hill, to Washington,
Okay.
to show lawmakers, to give them sort of like
Some
a
context.
lesson in payments,
Yeah.
right? And I wanted to just kind of give you sort of like some high level data that they were that they
Sure.
shared.
Right.
Globally, e-commerce spend more than tripled in the 10 years ending in 2024.
Wow. Yeah.
In 2014, consumers spent $1.2 trillion online, which was a lot in 2014,
Right. Right.
right? But 10 years later, they spent $6.8 trillion,
Wow.
which is like almost a 600% increase, right?
Right.
Am I doing
Yep.
my math correct? Okay. The share of global e-commerce spending done using smartphones also tripled from 19% in 2014 to 57% last year,
So
which
wait, hold
which
on. So
actually
you're
surprises
saying,
me.
wait, so what are you saying? You're saying last year you're saying 57% of what? 57% of e-commerce ran mobile phone, or what was that?
Of e-commerce. Of
So 2014 e-commerce 19% or whatever
Right,
was on the
was
phone,
using
was
smartphones.
using smartphones. Last year 50 something percent using smartphones.
Right.
Wow. Okay. I mean, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but it's still a staggering number.
It's a staggering number. It surprises me only because I don't know. I like bigger screens when I'm looking at something, I
Yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah. Sure.
somebody sent
Yeah.
me something the other day, yesterday, and I was like, no, let me jot down that URL. I got to look at that,
Right, right, right.
I'll get a
Well, you know
better
what?
look at that.
So this is so interesting, Patty. So let me pull a thread back around, okay?
Okay,
So
sure.
going back to ChatGPT, right? So think about this for a
Right.
minute. The
Uh-huh.
only the only reason that you care, like it's not that you actually want a bigger screen. What you want is you want to be able to see all of the options so that you can make the best choice,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah,
Well,
right.
with AI is going to be better at making that choice than you are. So when you think about how
Yeah.
you're going to find products, it's actually, as a general rule, all of these kind of think about shopping, think about creating a trip itinerary, all of that. It's
Uh,
actually the best way to do it is when I do those kind of things, I walk over to my assistant and we have a conversation. And she says, "Well,
right.
the different options are you could go Southwest, you could go this, you could fly private. This is and it's like here's the cost." And then I
Right.
say, "Oh, okay, I kind of like this option. What about the hotels?" And she says, "Well, you could do this hotel." And then when we're all done, I walk away from the desk. She books everything for me, right? That's
Right.
ideal. Well,
Right.
if AI can bring that experience to everybody to say, just have a conversation. So when you're looking for a product, you don't need a big
So what if
screen.
I'm saying, okay, I'm looking for a new lawnmower, let's say,
Right.
right? which is something actually I am looking for.
Right. So
Looking for
instead,
a new
and
lawnmower.
think about it this way: you asked that question, instead of showing you a screen with 18 different lawnmowers, it says, "Well, let me ask you some more questions, Patty. What are you using this lawnmower for? How big is your yard? Right? How
Yeah,
much do you want to
yeah.
spend?" And as the AI, as ChatGPT would fully understand what you're looking for, it then serves up the perfect lawnmower or maybe the perfect 2 or 3. You no longer
That's
need the big screen. So
sure,
that's
sure.
why I'm saying, that's why I said earlier that I could see ChatGPT competing with Amazon, because it's technically that conversational experience, in my opinion,
Right.
is actually a better shopping experience anyway.
No, I 100% agree with you. I hadn't thought about it in that term, in those terms, but you're right because it is. It's like asking me. It won't show me the stuff that I have absolutely no interest in.
Right. It's you
Right.
don't in other words, it's not that you want a lot of options. What you want is you want to find the perfect lawnmower,
Right.
right? And
Right.
it's just that with the current options available to you of shopping, it's like, if I can see more options, I'm going to make a better choice,
Right.
right?
Right.
But as people get more and more comfortable using AI for that, it's like, no, actually AI is going to make a better choice for me, because I'm going to give it all the information, it's going to ask me
Yep.
all the relevant questions, and then AI is going to crawl the whole internet and find the best deal for me.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay.
So,
I'm psyched. I'm
there
psyched
you
for
go.
that.
So I'm just tying these threads together here.
Yeah. You're good at that. You're good at that. Okay.
Uh,
The other thing, wallets. Digital wallets. They accounted for 53% of e-commerce spend in 2024 and
mm,
for 32% of point of sale spending.
ooh, okay.
That's
Wow.
a lot.
That's a ton.
Almost a third of POS spending was with wallets.
Mm.
And then one
So,
last
so
statistic.
just to clarify for our listeners, I think I
Sure.
understand. You're talking about Google Wallet, Apple Pay,
Right.
etc. Okay,
Right.
got
Exactly. Yeah. Not. Yeah. And in the old days, it was my leather wallet.
it. I know. I just wanted to clarify so everybody knew what you. Yeah.
So yeah, for the people that are my
Uh,
age, it's the digital ones, not the leather
yeah.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so one last statistic I wanted to share. Global account to account spending is projected to balloon to $936 billion by 2030,
Mm,
compared to 152 billion back in 2014. So
right.
that just shows you, you know, we all know that a lot of that account to account spending, or P2P spending, as it's also called, you
Right.
know, is is not just between Patty and James. It's
Right.
between, Patty and CC Sales Pro, or
Right.
it's
Exactly.
it's right. So the bottom line, I think, and this is what WorldPay was saying to the folks in Washington, is digital payments really do hold the key to unlocking global growth.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
everything now is going to be, I mean, when you and I talk about this in another year or two, it's all going to be digital payments.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
even
crazy.
I carry less cash than I used to carry. I still
Yeah.
carry some. My
Right.
nephew came by. My nephew got married the other day, and he stopped by. I wanted to see him and his brother. He's in the military. He came home,
Sure.
got
Sure.
married. Wanted to see them. Well, I had $100 bill. Stick it in an envelope because,
Right.
right? I mean
Right.
that showed
It's
something.
it did. It's still the truth of the matter is, whether it's just the history of human interaction that we're fighting against. I mean, that just feels better than saying, "Hey, I want to Venmo you $100 for your wedding." It
Right,
just doesn't
right.
feel as
It
good. I
just
don't know
doesn't.
why.
It's not tangible.
It's
It's
not
not
tangible.
tangible.
It's a little awkward. It's like, "Oh no, I don't want you to have to do that." No, no, no. Hold your phone up here so I can. It's like,
Right.
really, I don't know. It doesn't feel the
Yeah.
same.
No,
So
no, no.
yeah,
I
I agree.
agree. I actually thought about that. It's like, oh, I could Venmo him some money, but I
It just
have a
doesn't feel the
card
same.
here. I have a wedding card here. Why don't I
Right.
just
Why don't I put the money in the card?
in the card?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So,
Interesting. Well, Patty,
so
this has been fascinating. I just love the Today in Payments. I want to remind everybody again, go to todayinpayments.com. What you're going to be able to do there is actually just see these little sessions that we do, stay up to date on the latest payments knowledge, and of course, always just keep listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast, and we'll bring them to you
by,
every week.
by all means.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Patty.
James. Sure.